Hi there, my name is Paul Thompson and today I'm going to talk to you about the implications of digital innovations and technology on business education at university level. So we're going to talk a little bit about educational methods, the transformation of education, the barriers of implementation of digital technologies, and how this affects the business environment. So the traditional model at higher education level is to get students into a lecture hall, fill it up and dictate things at them. There's also tutorials that the students can go to where they can discuss with their tutors and their classmates the lecture topics that they've been given so far. This is quite a teacher-oriented and inflexible method of teaching that only really speaks to one or two learner styles. As we move into the age of acceleration, we are moving towards a blended learning environment, a mixture of traditional teaching methods and digital technologies. Having spoken with 4 students and recent graduates from different business courses at different institutions, it is clear that most of their course content is still delivered through traditional methods. They all speak of digital learning environments as a place to find relevant module materials and to keep up to date, but there's little or no interactivity or online community associated with it. Although they find it beneficial as a resource, it's not something they view as a particularly dynamic environment. When asked about the UWS digital learning environment, Dr. Kenny Forbes believes it's a good resource and it could be used in a better way by more members of academic staff, but to do so would be very time consuming. Back in '98, Black and Wiliam noted the importance of ensuring the choice of tasks for a class correlates with the learning aims, and that it should serve to provide an opportunity for students to express their understanding. More recently, Ken Robinson stated that our education system no longer meets the challenges of our contemporary culture, and he quoted Abraham Lincoln, "The dogmas of the past are quite inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion." So he clearly believes that education needs to be transformed into something else.
It's not. Every education system in the world is being reformed at the moment, and it's not enough. Reform is no use anymore, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need, and the word's been used many times during the course of the past few days, is not evolution, but a revolution in education. This has to be transformed into something else.
So how can we transform it? By incorporating digital technologies and innovations, we're able to create the blended learning environment. But in a way which we use these technologies, it varies at the moment. So Puente de Chura developed the SAMR model, which identifies 4 levels of digital incorporation and split them into 2 categories. The first category is enhancement. Here we see the technologies used as a substitute for traditional methods or processes, but there's no functional change to the actual delivery of said content. Think of it as replacing the acetate sheets on an overhead projector with a PowerPoint presentation. The second level of enhancement is augmentation. We still substitute the technologies, but there's an improvement in the functionality. We can now add videos to our presentations and further improve dynamic presentations using software like Prezi. Puente de Chura's second category discusses transformational levels. Here we can use technology to redesign and modify tasks. He describes the difference between augmentation and modification is whether you're essentially reproducing what you were doing before in your practice, or if you're significantly modifying it but keeping the heart of the matter. This specific task to create a video presentation could be defined as a modification of an augmented task, using technology to produce video content that is using a significantly different skill set to a standard presentation. One level up from modification is the redefinition of tasks, the use of technology to create previously inconceivable processes and methods. Much of Puente de Chura's work speaks of this level being heavily collaborative, allowing students to simultaneously create digital work and share knowledge. He This exploits the functionality of digital technology that allows for instantaneous communication and feedback. And it means that students can actively learn from each other. And in this clip, it's described by Puente as gateways to each other's knowledge.
Wonderful. Now, suppose that you're saying, okay, I'm using digital maps, but now I'm not just going to ask the students to replicate what I would have done with traditional paper maps. Instead, I'm going to say I still want them creating maps because it's important for them to develop the understanding of geography. But I'm going to ask them to create the maps in such a way that they're interacting with each other, so that they create the digital maps in shared sites and they use them as gateways to each other's knowledge. So now one student is very interested in the archaeology aspect, and that student focuses on things like where were the temples. Another student is very interested in commerce. So they focus on where were the trading ports, and they create their maps. You have them engaging in a deeper conversation where you're using the digital maps as a gateway for a social practice of exploration.
It would appear that there are clear advantages to the incorporation of digital technologies within the blended learning environment. We have the ability to access digital content from global online repositories that store millions of academic papers that we couldn't possibly store physically on campus. We can use the digital learning environment, in our case Moodle, to stay informed of course structure and access relevant materials. We can use the ubiquitous nature of Web 2.0 technologies to collaborate with other students. A recent example being a group of students in America simultaneously using Google Docs to create their lecture notes, work on the same notes, share knowledge and ideas, ask each other questions, and come to a group consensus about what the lecture was about. We could be active participants in online communities. So digital innovations and technologies allow us to move away from the traditional educational methods that relied heavily on linguistic and logical learning styles. This was not always suited to all students because each may have a preferred learning style, be it visual, auditory, verbal, physical, logical, solitary, or social. By delivering content and producing coursework through digital processes, we're able to meet more of the preferred learning styles and satisfy a larger number of students, whilst also engaging them in multi-sensory learning. From my experience though, and from the experience of those I interviewed, there seems to be a disconnect between the innovative way content is delivered to the student and the more traditional formats in which they are expected to express their learning through assessment. Knowledge gleaned from dynamic content based on digital technologies is often returned through text-based essay forms and reports or presentations. However, Robinson also believes that innovation is hard for people to undertake because it challenges what is perceived to be common sense. This may lead to a number of barriers to blended learning environments and their implementation, and that was discussed in a paper by Porter, Graham, Bodily and Sandberg. The first problem is advocacy. Academic staff feel sceptical of advocates if they're departmental leaders or if they come from administrative roles, because they either don't understand the practicalities of incorporating digital technologies, or they believe that it may be driven by a financial or cost-cutting motive to change the teaching method. Preferred are advocates from a teaching perspective, those that have been in the trenches working directly with students with the new technologies, and they can sell the educational benefits of these systems because they can compare them to previous practices. The next issue is infrastructure. The students need an infrastructure of systems that are capable of delivering the methods, and it has to work consistently. There's no point introducing a technology to the learning environment when it's inaccessible or cannot be relied upon to complete tasks. In my interview with David William Roddy III, we discussed this exact point. For this specific assessment, I wanted to complete this assignment using TouchCast, software we were introduced to earlier in this trimester. However, I don't have easy access to an iPad, and the editing software isn't available on any other device, so I was unable to complete the task using the engaging functionality of that particular medium. Instead, I reverted back to good old YouTube, standard video. We also suffer from other problems on campus in the digital environment, namely slow and intermittent wireless internet access and a university-wide block on types of content or websites that will be useful for study through their servers. The third major issue is the aptitude of academic staff. I'm not a computer person. Some staff don't feel capable of producing content for the digital environment or using digital technologies at all, let alone teaching digital practices and encouraging students to produce their own digital content as coursework rather than traditional essays. One person interviewed in this study stated that more time is spent trying to resolve technical problems rather than engaging with students in the module materials. While we can acknowledge the benefits of a digital blended learning environment, we also need to be mindful of these barriers and these issues. In my interview with Kenny Forbes, he was keen to stress that the University of West of Scotland are trying to move towards increasing the number of coursework submissions in a non-traditional format. And he felt that he personally was capable of meeting that challenge, mainly the challenge of increased use of digital technologies. He did note that he felt that further digital training may be necessary for staff if they're required to deliver content using these new methods, because they change so quickly. And it's also conceivable that understanding of and aptitude in digital technologies is more difficult to train later in life, especially for educators who have been through traditional systems, and that's how they learn to express their academic opinion and express their knowledge. So it may seem counterintuitive to millennials that have lived their entire lives living and breathing these new technologies where everything's accessible and there's lots of different types of content that stimulate you in different ways. Another direct issue with the use of digital technologies as medium for both content production and delivery is that our digital landscape changes so quickly that systems and processes and methods taught at the start of a degree programme may be obsolete by the end. With specific regard to the business environment out there in the real world, there's a need for job candidates to already possess a digital skill set. David William Roddy III was particularly adamant that small and medium-sized businesses just don't have the time or the resources to train graduates and students in digital technologies that they feel they should already know how to use. What's more is most traditional businesses that don't deal in digital products and digital services, they don't really know what they need to exploit digital technologies to their advantage and reap the rewards because they don't understand them. And what's more is they don't really understand what they need from an employee or a contractor to come in to help them operate in a digital environment. The opinion of those interviewed seems to suggest that university education doesn't necessarily train students with the tools they need to be ready for the business world in a sort of digital capacity. And it may be more valuable to educate students in the use of professional industry standard software, things like Pro Tools, Photoshop, After Effects, Premiere Pro, and also how to use standardized web design platforms like WordPress was the one that was specifically mentioned by one interviewee because it powers 1/4 of the websites on the internet. So when asked for his thoughts from an educator's perspective, Dr. Kenny Forbes believed that technology moves so fast it would be very difficult to meet this challenge of training students in these technologies to a level where employers will be comfortable with them. But he agreed it's important to introduce students to it. He noted that there's a shared responsibility with the student and they should further investigate the digital technologies they've been introduced to themselves in their own time. Effectively, here's the keys to the car, off you go and drive it. So to conclude, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a McDonaldization project I've just completed. McDonaldization is effectively a process of rationalization, ensuring efficiency, calculability, predictability and control. Now, applying Ritzer's model to this topic of digital innovations in higher education, we can see that there are issues with all of these factors, and it is quite relevant. Are students really able to access digital technologies that businesses want? Do they have access to the appropriate hardware to complete tasks? As I said earlier, I had trouble completing this task in the manner I wanted because I don't own an iPad, I didn't have easy access to one, so I couldn't use TouchCast, which is a digital technology which I've been introduced to on my course. Can universities provide consistency in their digital environment, uninterrupted access to Wi-Fi, standardised use of digital learning environments that really exploits the full functionality of the sites? And can they maintain staff training at a rate where they're up to date with their understanding of all these technologies? So unless we're able to rationalise the technologies and methods in institutions that employers want, by and large we're not going to be able to produce a graduate base with a high proportion of digitally talented individuals. It'll remain a specialised field dominated by graduates that studied in specifically digitally innovative subjects like this one, digital marketing. For the most part, I don't believe we're meeting the transformational level of Puente de Chura's model, but there does seem to be a push by my own institution, the University of West of Scotland, to incorporate more digital technologies, innovations and transformative teaching and assessment methods. I agree with Kenny Forbes that a move in this direction will be a benefit to students moving forward in the future from higher education into the business world, because they'll have been immersed in these digital technologies, methods and practices that they'll be expected to understand in their working environment. I also believe that there's a lag between the innovations at the top of the food chain by companies like Google and Adobe through higher education into specialist digital companies and then on into the sort of traditional business market, because knowledge takes time to trickle down from the top and it'll meet resistance along the way. As Robinson said, there's a belief that it can't be done differently, it's always been done like this. But as we've seen over the last 25 years, word processing and traditional business software is now standardised and rationalised and in nearly every office. The same with internet, email, things like that. These things take time, but eventually everyone will get onto it as it becomes more rationalised, more McDonaldized and easier to use. So it's only a matter of time before our contemporary technologies that we're using now become more easily available. This video is a case in point, really. I'm using a green screen behind me right now. This wouldn't have been available to me 10, 15 years ago. Or if it would have been quite expensive. But I own the software, I'm able to use it. I own the hardware, I'm able to use it. It's been democratized, it's been McDonaldized. But of course, by the time all these technologies become McDonaldized and rationalized, we'll be on to other new technology and the process starts again. Thanks for listening.